Adversarial thinking is one of the most important aspects right now when we develop software, when we develop algorithms, networking, you call it. All types of technology brings an adversarial mindset. The question is, how can we use them properly to help the community, to help human society, and beyond that? This is the Hacker's Corner. Adversarial Thinking Edition. Hello everybody, welcome back. This is the Hacker's Corner Adversarial Thinking Edition. We're running a series of adversarial mindsets here in the Hacker's Corner show. My name is Servín. I'm a professor here at El Paso Community College, and I'm very happy that you all bring us to this new event called the Adversarial Thinking Mindset series. We've been running this show for a couple of seasons now, but now we're actually focusing in the next episodes. What is adversarial mindset, adversarial thinking? The whole idea here is to promote the idea of awareness, cybersecurity awareness, of course, when we develop software, when we retrieve information, when we use it in society. Also to remind you that we are running the adversarial border set as well as this part of series. We are running a hackathon on November this year. So I'm gonna invite you to go to the website Hack the Border, which is actually all the details that we're running right now about the workshops, about the professional development, and of course the hackathon, which is the largest competition that we're gonna have in this year. Today, I am very excited and honored to have a friend of mine that I consider, we met in Defcon, but I'm gonna talk about a little bit, John Clay, right? Joe, we wanna thank you here in the Hacker's Corner for being our guest. I know you are in some place that we don't know where is it, but you're here with us in this show. Thank you for coming to this show and welcome, Joe.
Well, thank you, it's an honor.
The honor us with this. You want to talk about a little bit about you before we actually go and introduce the entire topic of today, which is adversarial thinking?
Yes. I'm one of those old guys that remember game boxes back in the late 70s. And I decided to modify the Pong. My brothers and sisters weren't happy, but I won every time. And then for a while, I started with lots of electronics, turned around and realized that I could reverse engineer the code for a lot of games on Atari, Amiga, and other systems. So it was really nice. Instead of hit points where you'd end up decreasing and have to die and everything, I found the incrementers on a lot of the applications so that I would never lose and I could get through the game within a couple hours, which was pretty fun. So that, and when I was going to college, I had a professor, because I've been using Unix computers, which is now Linux, for probably 5 years. And in '86, I was finishing up my degree. And the professor said, among everybody else, you're going to get an F. I said, what did I do? He said, I want you to surprise me. I said, well, what are the constraints? Which is, by the way, good for adversarial thinking. And he said, here's the situation. You have to write what your constraints you chose and knock my socks off, and you got an A. I went, I don't have to take a test. That's awesome. So I walked back to the computer lab, found a AT&T 3B, which is a old computer nowadays. It used to be used to switch the phone systems back in the 70s and then 80s, and there's a few of them still around in the 90s. I broke into it, and then I noticed this really weird thing. It said it was connected to a network. I went, I wonder what this is. There's this thing called ARPA here. What does that mean? So I went and looked it up, and I found out it was a DoD ARPANET. So I wrote the whole thing up and what I did and what I found and everything else, and handed it over. He said, "Perfect, you got an A. And oh, by the way, until you finish your schooling, you're going to be administering the security of our ARPANET system." So that's where it started out. Um, just asking questions, asking, how does this work?
Mhm.
What are the constraints? What are the capabilities of this thing? Can I make it do something different than, expected? Just like the games, that I was mentioning where I reverse engineered them and
Yeah.
I made sure the hit registers, I would never die.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's how I started in the field. Since then, I've worked for building robots for Disney. I've been around the world for different work and projects. Worked for MITRE for a while, 6 years.
Mhm.
Worked for government contractors and corporations, and did a bunch of phone security for a company called Avaya.
Mhm.
So it's been very interesting. I have a lot of places on that I haven't put a lot of notes in my LinkedIn, but there's a lot of really fun things that I've done over the years. The other thing that I've done was I was looking for a community around me. Once I uh, exited school, I really didn't have peers
Mhm.
around me, so I went looking for peers. And the first thing I found was bulletin boards. So I became friends with lots of friends with bulletin boards.
Wow.
And then that became pretty interesting from a technical standpoint.
Yeah.
Got to meet people and got to talk about things and what can be done and what can't be done.
Mhm.
And we they showed me this thing called a blue box on making phone calls. That was interesting because we didn't have digital phones at that point. We could use the dial tones to make changes in it. So that was kind of a weird thing to learn, but it was fun. So, it's just going from place to place and asking the question, what is this? How do we make this work? How do we break it in a very interesting way? And how do I fix it so nobody else can break it? So it's a pretty interesting mindset to have.
Uh-huh. That mindset. Actually, let me park in that question that
Mm,
in that concept that you said, break it, fix it. Um, Let me confess how I met you. I met you in Defcon, if it's okay to say. Is that okay? That's cool because
yes, I have my
you
DEFCON.
have the
I have my
Defcon.
DEFCON
Can
thing
we
on the
see,
back
can we see it, Joe? The Defcon flag. That's very impressive, as a matter of
because
fact.
I help manage this little 30,000 person conference. This year, I took the time off just to go to the Quantum Village,
And that's how I met
which is
you.
where I met you.
I met you. I met you in the Quantum Village. I sat down there for a while. So you mentioned Goon, right? You are one of
Mhm.
those. Is that cool if we say it is a convention of hackers, DEF CON?
Yes, it is.
So
Yes, it is.
it's the largest hacking convention that takes place in Las Vegas every year, where more than 30,000 hackers around the world, they go there, right? And it's a great place to learn, and probably not to bring your cell phone or your laptop or your mobile device unless you know what you're doing. Is that kind of
Right.
accurate?
Yeah, absolutely.
You shared when we were in the Quantum Village, Joe, that you've been since Quantum 5, and this was Quantum 31. Is that right?
Not quantum. Yeah, conference.
Oh,
Yeah,
not
that
Quantum,
was
the
the
conference. Sorry.
conference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been at the quantum. I've been at the conference for years, but I've
Mm-hmm.
been going to conferences for many, many, many years.
Defcon. Yeah.
Most of them were little 5, 10, 15 person. When I started at DEF CON, it was interesting because there was about 1,000 of us. It was crazy. We could see each other. What cool projects are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And people could sit down, play in the pool, everything else. Um, but it was always interesting the conversations that we had, that we could sit down and, you could sit down next to somebody, not know them,
Mm-hmm.
and realize, oh, she's a professor from Berkeley. She's basically teaches law and cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Those are kind of interesting moments to suddenly realize that there's this whole community just asking questions about how our technology works and is it reliable and can we protect it.
And you mentioned, for example, law. You mentioned something else about networking. They call something villages. Can you tell us a little bit about what they call it, why they call it villages, and why we have villages in Defcon?
Oh, yeah. So from the original time of Defcon, it was put together by Dark Changent, that was his bulletin board hacker name. Basically, it started in '93. And it was just a bunch of people because they were all shutting down their bulletin boards. That happened to be, if you saw the movie Hackers, it happened to be the approximate time that hackers occurred. That got law enforcement freaked out, and everybody started turning down their bulletin boards, and they decide, hey, let's have one last party. Yeah. Well, that party is still going.
Yep.
They did Vegas because it was the cheapest place in the country at that time that you could go to a cheap hotel and do the whole conference. In some cases, randomly, some cases not. But this, let's see, we saw 30,000 people in 2019. It looks like we were up to 28,000 this year, this last year. Which is pretty cool. The biggest thing about Defcon is that we recognize that we have a lot of kindred souls that want to meet and learn from each other. And you can't do that in a big, big room. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So Jeff and a bunch of the crew said, hey, well, let's create these villages. Well, so the first one was the Wall of Sheep. Oh, that was so much fun.
Well,
I was part of that. I was part of the founding of that particular group.
Okay.
So the Wall of Sheep, at that point, we're talking 99, 2000, when everybody was getting wireless networks on their laptops and everything else. So we put up all the access points, and we noticed that nobody was encrypting them. And no one was putting their passwords encrypted or their log names, and we could see what they were doing. So myself and a few other people got some paper plates. Somebody had a instant camera, and we found out who it was. You know, so and so from the DoD, so and so from this bank, so and so from this company. You know, this hacker, that hacker, and we took on the plate. We put their login and password, and we'd go looking for them, and we took their picture and we put their picture underneath. It was very entertaining, and it continues. That's the probably oldest one. So right now they do things like capture the packet. You know, you're listening to it, you're doing forensics, or you can learn how to do forensics, how to do network monitoring, packet analysis, things like that. And this is something that's useful for anybody that's on a network or thinks you're going to be compromised.
Yeah.
Or to test your security tools to make sure they're even working. So that's really the foundation. And then Tool, which is the open organization for lockpickers, were the second. And mostly what that was about is, think about it. When you're a kid, okay, your parents have a key.
Right.
When they go out and it's locked, and it locks going in or out, you could be locked out. That's kind of a frightening thing to do. Also, you could be locked outside because your parents are inside and had locked it and you didn't know that it was locked. So, or you knew it was locked and you couldn't get in. You know, I remember that as a kid.
Yes.
What Lockpicking Village is to think about one of the oldest technologies. Locks have been around since the 1800s.
Yeah.
And there's been challenges of breaking locks left and right. There's a whole history of it. But the Lockpicking Village teaches us that there are vendors that choose to make something cheap, and therefore, with simple tools, somebody can break in.
Yeah.
And that really disturbs me. In fact, that's the first thing I did with the house I'm in right now is I upgraded all the locks and all the other things. But you
Mm-hmm.
get to learn how to do this particular process, and it kind of it feels really good to do it. But then it's kind of frightening to go, wait a second, my door is that same lock.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can get in without even being detected.
Yeah.
So they teach things like how to do lock forensics, which is kind of cool. They have handcuffs. They have all these others to look at how these technologies are built.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of there's a lot of cuffs up on Amazon that don't work real well. They could be popped very quickly, which is very funny. But and a funny part is during my yes, I have Christmas here. I have a Christmas party. One of the things we do is we pull out the lockpicks, and anybody new, we teach them how to do it, and we ask them, how does that make you feel? Does that make you feel less secure or more secure that you have that knowledge? And what are you going to do to solve it if it's going to harm you?
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the adversarial process
Mm-hmm.
in a using locks. And now you have the packet village. But then we ended up with social engineering. How do you convince people to, give your phone number or give your password or whatever? One of the fun ones that I was at, yeah, I've been hacking cars for 16 years, I guess, and we did all kind of things with cars. Unfortunately, I have NDAs on that, but different vendors will bring their vehicles in and they'll teach you how to hack it. And if you find vulnerabilities, you get a prize.
Mm-hmm.
There was two guys that broke a Tesla, and they got a Tesla out of it. Except they then figured that the money was cheaper because it's not like one of them lived in L.A. and one of them lived in Kansas, and you can't like
Yeah.
share a car that way.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so that's the kind of stuff. But we also have biohacking,
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more.
which
Yeah.
is a whole nother thing, and that is how do we hack our bodies to do certain things that we can't. Things like don't have sugar, don't have caffeination, but what if I do or don't? Things like CRISPR, which actually allow minor changes to your genetic material. They created a 3D printed um, device that if you had the right chemicals in it, you could make aspirin. And it
Wow.
was literally free. And another one was, I guess you know about the EpiPens, how expensive they used to be. They were $350.
Yeah.
Uh, Defcon basically, once they showed that they could make it for $5 by
Wow.
themselves, they were able to convince the government, wait a second, if a bunch of hackers can figure this out, ah, it should be priced appropriately. So we as hackers influence the general community to be better,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty interesting. And then other things like Red Team, which is specifically offensive, Blue Team, which is specifically defensive.
Yeah.
The AI Village was fun. I've been to that one a couple times. We have Crypto Village, which is how do you break cryptography and privacy? How do you ensure that your communications is secure? Typically, we have hardware hacking, which is things like microcontrollers and learning how to do embedded systems and other things. ICS, which are the things that the SCADA stuff that protects our electrical grids and water systems. And they basically every year all these different vendors bring their products in and they say, please hack them for us so that we can make it better. Wireless Village, which has become really fun, which is, hey, your Bluetooth is showing or your near field's not off and somebody's going to steal your credit card because the way you have it configured.
Yeah.
IoT Voting Village was the one that I had some influence in. In the 2000, there was an election. I was living in Florida at the time,
Ah.
and I voted. Yay. On my little sticker. It's old and anyway. So what the issue was that I went into the library, which is where we were. I plugged in and I went, I wonder what's on this network. And I turned it on and I was watching the election information go back and forth.
Wow. So you were seeing the
That
whole
was,
traffic.
yeah, that was horrible.
Wow.
So I had this conversation with the voting people, and they brought the local police, and then I called some friends from other law enforcement, federal law enforcement, and they went, listen to him. And they started trying to secure it. Several people from that were doing that ended up quitting that county because things were caught. And eventually it took about 5-6 years until I told this story enough that friends of mine basically said, well, hell, let's go find some voting machines. And that's what they did. They went to eBay and they downloaded or paid for all these old devices.
Yeah.
And the first year that they had the voting village, we had all of our. By the way, we have a lot of lawyers that are also hackers.
Yeah.
Not just law hackers,
Right.
but people that do different things.
Interesting.
They were there when all the voting booth companies showed up in suit and ties, and they had a cease and desist. And then all of our lawyers from Berkeley and Harvard and Oxford and everything else said, I think we need to have a conversation outside this room right now. And they did. And since then, they've come back to say, hey, please, people, help fix our systems. Fortunately, prior to not this last election, but the election before, all of the technology had been fixed. And I was really happy that they did it after, picking on people about it. It felt good that, the community, I was just one person having that conversation, but the community themselves said, let's fix this thing. It's important for our democracy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then we also have like drone wars, which is fun. And there's an ethical village, what is appropriate, what's not. Let's see, Cloud Village, because now Cloud's new AppSec, where people write software and they actually realize that it's broke. Recon Village is interesting. It's open source intelligence, which is how do you go find a bad guy? Okay. Somebody's hacked you and you figured out that you have enough crumbs that you can go find out who that was. Yeah. And I've done that for years too. I even spoke at Defcon on that topic in 2004 or 5. So that's an issue. They have Duplication Village, which is, download things. Ham radio. A lot of the community is learning to use ham radio because we can move digital data across that. And we can digital data globally. The best one this year for me was the Quantum Village.
Yeah.
If you've ever been to one of these events, it's pretty cool because usually the first year you have scientists and mathematicians in every single one of these villages to start with, and then you end up with the people that just want to try. What can I do? What can I break? How can I fix it? How can I actually change the world positively? And that's what the Quantum Village was about. They were looking for more PhDs that knew this technology, mathematicians and engineers, but also people with vision on where we need to go with quantum technology. But otherwise, there's not much going on at all.
What you were mentioning is a very nice encapsulation of Defcon. I really appreciate that. I mean, it wouldn't come from anyone better than a goon, which you are. And you have all this history, Joe, about the progress, the dynamics, how it's been evolving through technology. And again, we're gonna continue this in part 2, but one of the things that caught my attention that you mentioned is that there's some vendors to go there and put their device there, put their product and say, here it is, hack it. And that's probably the best way to come up with all the vulnerabilities, to come up with all the possible what we did wrong. It's a great exercise for the people who like to go and exercise their hacking skills, but also for professional development. So I look professional development all the time.
Absolutely.
And I think Defcon is the most rich professional development conference or symposium or technical, I don't know how you want to call it, gathering, where you're going to learn everything raw, right, all the way to the most pragmatic way. But something that caught my attention was when I walked through Defcon, there's some sessions that says closed sessions. And there was people with all, you mentioned the suits, right? So there are people from those 3 digits, 3-letter agencies always
yes.
there and staring and seeing this is sensitive and this is confidential, this is top secret. And not everybody can go and sit in those talks or demos or expos. And I would like you to talk about that thing later on about those phenomena. Now, I want to thank you because this is a continuation series. There's something that you would like to add before we conclude this episode?
Yes. If you go to a village, you have a high probability of just being interested in learning something that you will find some vendor, some company, some government agency to say, hey, we've got a position open in this. Are you interested?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the interesting part of that is when you're early in your career, a lot of companies and government agencies will say, well, finish your associates. Let's make sure you finish your master's or your bachelor's. But, oh, by the way, would you like to get your master's? We'll pay for that. Oh, geez, we think you should be a PhD. We'll pay for that. So from an education standpoint, you get some really opportunities that you would never get anyplace else.
I agree.
And that's fun. And it's really fun to be one of those recruiters for different projects. And it's really fun to sit back and help somebody understand, no, that's really where they're from. And yes, they want to pay you good money to do this more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing, you know?
I think so too. And I think that's a great way to connect what you just mentioned about the experience to go try to learn something through, hey, you know what? Now I have this opportunity to increase my knowledge, and not only that, to expand my knowledge. Joe, I want to thank you now. I want to see you all in the second part of this show.